Megidi Moin und herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge SEO Presso. Mein Name ist Bjoern und heute hört ihr eine Aufzeichnung der SEO-Com, wo ich mit Jes Scholz gesprochen habe. Jes Scholz ist Marketing-Consultant aus Sydney, Australien. Wir haben gesprochen in der Reihe SEO Persönlich, wo wir hinter die Persönlichkeit einer SEO schauen. Jes hat eine beeindruckende Karriere hinter sich, ist nach Berlin gekommen aus Sydney, um in der Start-up-Welt Fuß zu fassen, dann bei Ringier, einem Schweizer Medienhaus, angeheuert als damals Head of Online Marketing Emerging Markets, wo sie zuständig war für alle neuen Märkte in Afrika, Asien. Dort habe ich sie kennengelernt. Wir hatten die Ehre, in einigen Projekten, einigen Diskussionen zusammenarbeiten zu dürfen. Sie hat sich dann weiter hochgearbeitet bis zum Group Chief Marketing Officer einer Firma, die über 6.000 Mitarbeiter in der Welt hat, 1 Milliarde Umsatz macht und sich dann entschlossen, mit ihrer Familie zurück nach Sydney zu gehen, den Job sozusagen an den Nagel zu hängen, um jetzt selbstständig aus Sydney zu arbeiten. Was eine Frau dazu bewegt, in einem alteingesessenen Medienhaus in die Chefetage mit einzusteigen, was sie dort erlebt hat und was sie dazu bewegt hat, zurück nach Sydney zu gehen, das alles erzählt sie in einem sehr persönlichen Podcast auf Englisch. Ich wünsche euch jetzt viel Spaß und bitte nicht vergessen zu kommentieren, Bewertung dazulassen, würde mich sehr freuen. Hi Jes.
Hi.
Really nice to see you, really nice to meet you. It's been a long time.
It's been too long.
It's been too long and there was a lot of changes in your life. I think we met the first time together in Zurich when I was working for Ringier. You were working for Ringier back then out of Berlin, right? And then you became CMO of Ringier group-wide. And now you moved back to Sydney. You're originally from Australia, from Sydney. You moved back with your other part of the family, which is German. So you took your German family, your kids. You have 2 kids, right? 2 kids, right? And your husband. So I would like to talk about you as a personality today, right? I do have this series called SEO Persönlich in German, where we, just trying to look behind the personality of a search personality that you are. You are jet-lagged. You just were flying in yesterday to Frankfurt from Sydney. So you told me you're hyped up. So we take the opportunity now to keep you awake, so to speak. But what I would like to know is the first time I had you on my radar was when I was working for a year. So, we got to know each other, and it turned out that you came from Sydney to Germany and were already working in the startup scene back then, also as an SEO already, right? How do you end up coming from Sydney to bloody great Berlin, working for startups?
I think like most people by accident.
Yes.
So I had a 1-year work travel visa. And my idea was to base myself in a European country, see as much as I can traveling in that year, and then go back home. And I'd saved up all my money in order to do it. I burnt through that money in a month living in Berlin. So then I had to get an actual job. And I used to bartend. That's how I paid for my university. And I had a lot of experience there. And so I was trying to get a job in a bar, but my German was appalling. Like I could barely speak a word, so nobody would hire me. I was like, okay, well, I'll just fall back on my university degree, as you do, and try to get a job in SEO. And I fell into a startup incubator and then just was there for 4 years, as most people.
It's so cool because I have almost a similar story, because when I met my she wasn't my wife back then, but she was done with the studies. She is a doctor, right? And she desperately wanted to go to the UK to work as a doctor, as a locum doctor in the UK. I was done with my studies. I was actually trying to work then for the Olympics in London back then, 2012. So we went to 2010 or so. I applied, I don't know for how many jobs at the Olympics, never taken into any interview, right? And then I also said, okay, what can I do what others can't? Okay, I can speak German. Let's look for German jobs. And that's how I ended up in England as an SEO. So cool.
The reason I found out, and this was a couple of months into working for the startup incubator, the reason that they hired me is because they were about to sign a big Australian client. And so they wanted to be able to say, we've got an Australian on staff that knows your market.
But you had no background in digital marketing or startup or company building or business development whatsoever.
No, by that stage I did. So I have a degree in marketing, which I barely ever use. But it's good to have that foundation. So the marketing theory I have all down. And then I had worked in Australia for a small e-commerce company, but it wasn't specifically SEO. I was just a general digital marketer. So I did everything from email to social to technical SEO to push notifications, like everything, copywriting. So when I was coming and working in the startup scene, I wasn't even an SEO then. I was, again, just a generalist. I did SEO, but I also did a whole bunch of CPC. So it wasn't, I don't think I've ever actually been purely an SEO. I've gone from generalist marketer, digital marketer, then worked my way up to CMO. And now I'm a consultant, but I don't only consult in SEO. It's just SEO is the passion. SEO is the channel that I always go back to. SEO is for me the fun one, the interesting one, the challenging one. So that's where I spend most of my attention, even though I can do the others in a pinch if I have to.
And then, like, from the startup incubator, you landed at Rückkehr at their Berlin. So the Rückkehr is a Swiss media company. They own one of the biggest, the biggest tabloid newspaper in Switzerland, for example. Yeah, but then they also have businesses in Africa and Asia and stuff, mostly operated out of Berlin, where you were sitting, right? So all those.
Back in the day, yes, it's changed a fair bit.
Changed a bit, but tell me about the shift. Like, how did you got in contact with a Swiss brand in out of Berlin? Were they seeking for somebody, or like was it vitamin B, or like?
They were looking for someone because they were looking to expand their African operations. Yeah. And they wanted someone with strong digital experience, and they weren't really having much success looking for that level of talent that was willing to have that level of travel, that could speak, like, English is important when you're going down to Africa. And so a headhunter was a friend of mine, and she was based in Berlin. And so she was like, you should apply for this role. And so I flew into Switzerland. I met the guy who would become my boss. And that was it. I was so stoked.
What is Robin Ling? Yeah. But when I worked for Rückkehr, so I was working for the tabloid news site, blick.ch, right? But I think we had 1 or 2 meetings, because sometimes, I don't know why, they also requested things like requested me to consult other branches, and that's, I think we ended up in one meeting at, like, it's also funny. So the higher you get in the building, the more important the people are. That's it. And I remember we ended up in this, like, a board meeting room, like with like a really huge table and stuff. And then we had like an exchange also with all those others. I think Tim, I can't remember his name. So everybody that at least had a responsibility about a different. But coming out of Sydney, is that something that you learned something about the world, or like you learned something about Europe specifically? Just asking because Australia is so far off, like from our point of view, so far off, right? And then coming to Berlin, of course, is international, same as Melbourne or Sydney as well. I'm not saying it's not international, but like looking at Europe, where you within 1 hour you're in a different culture, right? In Sydney, you fly 1 hour in same. It's different. It's same. And yeah, you same state and you speak the same language. And here within an hour, it's a cultural jungle, right? Is that something that was thrilling to do, or is very interesting to do? Or like just give me your experience with that.
I think it's the best thing that I've ever done in my life, because it's that understanding of difference and being able to then apply that in the marketing strategies that you do. Mm-hmm. If you don't travel, if you don't understand other cultures, you don't see how other markets operate and the opportunities that could be there that you can then apply and be a first mover, you're missing out on a huge competitive advantage. So I spent a lot of time in China, for example, where obviously it's not a Google market and you have mobile money and it's a completely different setup and completely different vibe. And seeing now where the European markets are moving towards and that platforms are getting much stronger, it's so amusing for me because China's had that for 10 years, albeit in a different way. But it's this emergence of something that I'm so familiar with now coming into the European scene, or this concept of mobile money. Now it's becoming really common for people to just like tap their phone. This is funny for me because it's something that was down in Africa. In Kenya, had this well before you guys. This was just the norm.
Yeah.
Like this mobile money concept has been there for so many years.
Yeah, go to Berlin.
Mm-hmm. Yes, where everything, Zahlen bar, nur bar. So it gives you a broader perspective. And I think that makes you a better marketer and that makes you a better person. So anytime I can travel and go see a new culture, I will do it.
But is it fair to say that it doesn't matter what country, like the same business, e-commerce business, media brand, same problems, or is it different?
Similar but different. I think there's definitely shared problems, particularly when it comes to something like technical SEO. Like no developer anywhere in the world knows how to build a site. So that's something that you'll always be able to go in and know, okay, problem A, problem B, problem C, seen it before, know what we can do to fix it. But there is going to be specific cultural idiosyncrasies that you won't get. And this is why what I think is so important is for any brand to always have people from that market if you're going to be launching a product there. Yeah. And that's something that Rückkehr, so my former employer, always had as a strength. They always had teams in market and they would be the ones who were leading strategy, and I would be the one who would come in and listen to them and try to understand it, and then, well, for want of a hype word, but elevate it to the next level.
Yeah. What I found fascinating then, you became CMO of Rückkehr, and for those that don't know Rückkehr, I think it's back then when I was working there, like over 8,000 employees, right? They drove over 1 billion of revenue. So it's not a small company. It is a very, very big company, a lot of responsibilities across markets, across the globe, right? And you became CMO. Like how, give me the experience. How was it to become that job and drive that responsibility for you?
I think it's always easy to look back and say, oh, I planned it. I did not plan it. This was not something that I didn't join the company with the vision of I will become the CMO. It's something where when you do a good job, people recognize it. When you do a good job and you communicate that you do a good job, people recognize it more. And I think that's something that particularly women aren't good at. We're not good at sending out emails saying, this is the win that I got, or standing up in front of the board of directors and saying, my team did this, or I did this. Well, my male colleagues more likely to show the value of themselves. Yeah. So it's something where I needed to actively get out of, I want to do the thing. I want to be down in the weeds. I want to be working like deep hands-on with the team and training. That's what I really like. But I always had to make sure in my mind, I set aside time every week to communicate what we were doing. And that is really what started getting me that recognition. And then people understand, oh, actually, you know something others don't. You prove strategies that other people can't. You deliver KPIs that other people can't. And then they want that at scale. And the best way to scale is to put you higher up in the organization until you become CMO.
Yeah. And was it easy for you? Because, I mean, there's a lot of old structures. There's a lot of, it's a company that exists for a long time, right? And coming in such a position and, you have different board of directors, right? And, getting in there and trying to drive change, I can imagine is really, 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 really hard, especially, and you said it, also as a female, right? Because there's a lot of old white man, I would say. That's how I experience it, right? And you sit there like different mindset, different cultural background, but so that's how I experience you, with a very, driven personality, want to change something, right? So just, how hard is it to sit there at this board table and try to drive change? What is needed to drive that change? Let's put it this way.
Being authentic to who you are. Yeah. Like I am a little bit of a pit bull. Like when I want something, I know what I want and I'm going to go after it. And if that is funding for a project, if that is to do a migration, if that is to completely change the strategy so that we're LLM ready, like whatever it is, I'm going to be focused on that. And it comes back to getting the buy-in of the influencers, which is not necessarily who you would expect looking at an organizational chart. I think that's one benefit of staying in a company for a longer period of time. I worked for Ringgit for over 11 years. Like I knew everybody. I'd outlasted most of them. I'd seen them come into the organization. So it's something where you can use that understanding to then try to get them on board with your priorities. And it comes back to, if I'm trying to explain an SEO concept, I don't talk about Google Search Console impressions. I don't talk about ranking. I don't talk about any of these metrics that I would discuss with another technical SEO. I talk about brand visibility. I talk about these marketing principles that I learned at university and coming back to what drives business value and tying it into that. So if I'm in front of a board of directors, I'm not going to go deep and technical into something. I'm going to understand what are they trying to drive beyond revenue, which obviously any corporate company is trying to drive. So you always mention, and this is how it impacts our end revenue. But on top of that, they'll tend to have certain priorities. So they want to reach Gen Z, or they want to strengthen their end user market, or whatever that might be. It comes to knowing those priorities and understanding how the work you want to do in SEO ties into that. And then I go into the board meetings as me. Like I don't have a corporate face and a personal face. I am who I am. I'm loud and I'm opinionated, and I don't really care who you are. I am happy to disagree with you if I think I'm right, but equally I'm also happy to listen to others' arguments and take them on board and change my mind. Yeah. And I think that ability to know how to present your ideas and that being fresh and being authentic gets through to these people who are used to seeing a lot of sale pitches, a lot of manipulation of numbers, a lot of corporatized political presentations. When you just come in with something that, here it is, this is why, this is how it helps you, you build that trust. And then with that trust, you get the resources that you need, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. Now what's also interesting, like I can imagine it's a, highly paid job, right? It's very high in the organization, right? So actually something which you would keep, right? You could say, okay, this is my golden cage now. I'm waiting. I'm doing this now until I'm done with working. But then you move back to Sydney, right? So there were driving factors that brought you back to Sydney. Take your family out of Berlin, out of where you actually build a life. You have like a fantastic job. You have like a lot of money that you earn, and you go back to Sydney. What were the driving factors? Like, can you give us like the sense of what kind of thoughts you had and what made you move?
Mainly my kids. So my son at the time was almost 4, and we weren't enjoying the Berlin weather particularly.
Can imagine, yeah, can relate.
And when I was growing up, I remember beach and rainforest and being outside all the time and riding my bike, and Berlin's not so conducive to those activities, and a lake is not a beach. There's very big differences between those bodies of water. And so we were speaking with my husband, and we were thinking about my son needs to start school. We don't want to pull him out of school. Like once he starts, we want him to be settled. And so we made the decision that it's better for the kids to go somewhere where there's more nature, there's more outdoors, there's schooling that we're happier with, to have our son and our daughter as well in there for all of their primary school years. We'll see when they're teenagers what happens, because it is very far.
It is very far, yeah. But again, you build your life, right? You have your certain income, you have like your flat, you have everything, and you just, get rid of everything and just move off. So, but what were your plans to? So you wanted to become a consultant when you go to Sydney? That was the plan, or you just went without any idea and then something turns out?
Yeah, you give me way too much credit. I don't have plans. I have desires. Like I knew I wanted to move back to Sydney close to the kids, and we figured everything else will work itself out. Ringgit was really good. Like I will give them 110% credit for this, that when I told them, it wasn't asking, it was telling, I am moving to Australia. Do you want to keep working together? They said, yes, we do. So they're like still one of my primary clients. I spend still a lot of time with them. I have other clients as well, but it's something where it wasn't such a big, scary jump because I still had some form of guaranteed income because I built that trust with them over the years. But it turned out to be a good move because whenever you think you are at the peak of your career, you're not. You need to change it up and do something different. I really think it was the right move for me because now I'm doing things I wouldn't have done if I just stayed in-house. And consulting gives me so much more access to see how other brands work, to see how other organizations work. They're all messed up equally, but it gives you more of a well-rounding. Coming back to what we're talking about before with culture, there is land and country culture, and there is organizational culture. And the more organizational cultures I see, the more value I get, and the more I can apply good principles to those working situations. So now I'm very happy that I did that change, and I'm earning more than I did before, which is always nice. So I think if you're ever scared about taking that next career step, just do it.
100%, yeah. I mean, I can again relate to this very much because when I left Ringier, I started working for Searchmetrics and headed their consulting unit, right? And just seeing like the different companies and different industries and really large enterprise companies, right, was so mind-blowing because, you know, what some people can just do with one SEO in-house, what kind of impact they are driving versus a team that has 10 SEOs, right? Not even half of the impact, right? And just to see that and the way how they execute, of course, as you said, all messed up. Everybody, or every company has the same problems, but the way how they execute and find solution for this problem is very different, and it definitely blew my mind. I mean, if you worked as an in-house for long years, you should definitely switch to consulting for a time just to see that difference. But vice versa as well, right? Also coming back from consulting, going in-house to, you know, learn those structures, learn how to talk to stakeholders, you know, this political game, all that is also something which you can use later as a consulting, as a consultant then as well. Yeah, absolutely. I said it also in the beginning, you were also one of the first female speakers that I saw in international companies, right? So I was at SearchLoft back then in London. So when I started SEO, I started in London. That's why my focus was the English market. And that's how I saw you also on those conferences. How did that end up? Because you came from Sydney, the startup incubator in Berlin, started then to work for Ringier. How did you make and you said it in the beginning, you didn't really just purely did SEO, more generous. However, you were, you know, famous on all those conferences. We saw your talks. You published on Search Engine Land and all those big media publications. You are good friends with international, situated SEOs and stuff. How did you end up in that scene, so to speak?
Like most things in life, by accident. I remember when I was a baby SEO, I would go to Search Lab. I would go to these conferences. Right. And it's such a shame that we don't have it anymore. I would see all of these speakers on stage, and I would just be awed by their knowledge. And when I got to that point where I thought I had something unique to share, I wanted to pay it forward to an extent. Like, these people inspired me. These people made me a better SEO by getting up and being so open about sharing their strategies, which is something that I think is very unique to the SEO community. I've spoken at other conferences. I've spoken at PPC conferences and email conferences and media conferences. And I think a lot of these other channels, no shade, but they hold their best things back. Yeah. And in SEO, we don't do that. In SEO, we're like, here, I'm going to lay it all out. This is everything that I can do. Best me. Like, we're friendly competitive. Yeah. And so when I had something that I thought was worthwhile, I wanted to share it. And my first speech I ever did was at Brighton. Yeah. So, it was terrible. My speech was terrible. I still have the slides because people ask me now, oh, how did you get to where you are with your speaking? And I'm like, no. Like, I'm going to show you the first slides that I ever did. They're appallingly bad. So it's something that I watched other speakers. I took the bits that I liked out of how they presented. It's something that I've worked on now for, over 10 years. But I encourage particularly females. I know that we're less likely to get up there and share what you've got. To any woman who's listening to this podcast, you have something to say. You should get up and say it.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And I think also the way, like, I work with a lot of females, also my teams. I tend to hire more females than males, or at least have a good mix, right? And the way, working with females in one team, gives you a different approach of solution finding, right? Because women think differently than men. That's fact, right? I totally agree. When I see female speakers on stage, they also blow my mind, because like the way how they work, the way how they approach things, the way how they storytell also is different from men, and definitely should brought on stage in every conference. Do you think, like, because I said you already started 2012, and now we are here at SEO-Com recording live, so to speak, and I would say the share of female speakers is at what, 40-50%, so approximately. So it changed over time, right? Do you see that as well? That it changed over time. Also, SEO it becomes more female, so to speak, as an industry.
We are getting better. I don't think we're where we need to be yet. There is definitely a much stronger female community there that is supporting more women speakers, or a stronger female presence. I think a lot of the conference organizers as well have gone extra means to find female speakers. So I was really impressed here at SEO-Com how well and balanced it is, and the level of the female speakers that they have as well is really high. Yeah. But it does come back to, we as a gender do need to put ourselves out there even more, because what we were talking about before, when you have a panel and the panel has the males and then the one token female speaker, yeah, it's 100% quota. Like that we need to get out of. Yeah. That would, for me, would be the next step, where it's not like, oh, you've got 40%, oh, you've got 30%. You've really just got a balance of, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of any other personal preferences or what you were born as, you're just the best speakers. You have the most to share. That's what we should all be aiming for.
Yeah. Yeah. What I also found interesting is, like, back then, like, female speakers covered more like the marketing topics, right? And now you see this today. A lot of technical topics are being covered also by female, and that's a wonderful development, because it was before nerdy male, all in this technical weeds and stuff, and now that changed completely. I would like to ask you another question. So you said, the family was the reason why you moved back to Sydney, right? How did, like, becoming a mother, a parent, changed your conception of work?
It gave me a lot more patience. Yeah. Yes, infinitely more patience. Before I had my kids, I would get really personally riled up about work things, because I don't really have a separation of, this is my personal life and this is my work life. This is my life, and yeah, there's aspects of both always in there. Particularly as a digital marketer, you never really switch off. That's not something that we have the privilege of doing. We don't work a 9-to-5 job. When I had the kids, you learn to work under the most stressful conditions, and you have to keep your cool. You have to be rational. You can't react emotionally. You have to understand where they're coming from and that it's not about you at all. Everything about what they're going through. And then that's something that I applied more and more. So I hope none of the companies I work with ever hear this podcast. But if I'm dealing with an executive, I just picture them as my 2-year-old. And whenever they want something, I explain it like I would to my 2-year-old. And you repeat the same thing 3 times in 3 different ways to get your message across. These things are something you learn when you have kids.
Yeah, and you're building up resilience, right? Because your tolerance of frustration needs to get very low, right? Because you can tell the 10th time, okay, you have to do your homework, and they're still asking, but why? Okay, I'm explaining you again why this is important, right? So you're building up resilience, and yes, patience is actually the best keyword, right? So we have 3 kids, and I can completely relate to this as well. But also and I think since Corona, most probably the importance of balancing this work-life blending is the new term, right? Like balancing this out now, also with remote work. I think Corona, for me personally, was the best thing ever could happen because I was also driven by work, right? It was the most important thing. I had to bring the kids into the kindergarten in the morning, and then it was from 9 to 6 or so I was in the office, and then back, and I was just constantly in work. Also on my way back, it was really hard for me to calm down, right? And now it's different because I know it, during the day, like the phases and dimensions, they're switching. And that for me was the best thing that could ever happen as a parent as well. I think I became I have to ask my kids, but I think I became a better parent as well.
Their answer will depend on the day and whether you've given them ice cream in the morning or not.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. But thank you very much, Jes. It was really nice talking to you. And thanks for your insight, also your personal insights. And I hope we see us tonight at the bar.
Definitely.
Maybe for one drink.
I'm Australian.
You're Australian, of course.
Of course, I'm going to be at the bar. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Ciao.